Hey everyone, and welcome back to a new video. It's the worst kept secret in Warhammer 40k right now, but we are undoubtedly heading toward the release of 10th edition later this year, likely in May or June. However, there's still plenty going on in 9th edition right now, with the Arks of Omen campaign seeing a swathe of new story content and rules, backed up by plenty of new models and box releases. You certainly can't say there's going to be much of a calm before the storm. But in this video, I want to talk about what I expect we'll see in the new edition, not just at launch, but more broadly across the whole 3 years. The reason is that since 9th edition launched back in 2020, and yeah, I really can't believe that much time has passed, Games Workshop has gradually changed how they handle aspects of their Warhammer games. Whether it's how they release points changes, FAQs and supplements, or the cadence and extent of model range updates, GW is trying new things, and I think that's going to play out even more over the next few years. So in this video, I'll touch on model releases, story focuses, and some of the rule shifts I expect to see in 10th edition. If you care to join me, then let's jump right in. Now, if there's one thing that is constant across all of the editions of Warhammer 40k, is that the setting remains a pretty bleak and grim place. Currently, Abaddon, Vashtor and Angron are ripping through the galaxy, and many of the heroes of the Imperium are struggling to keep the divided empire from imploding in on itself. But as the Arks of Omen series reaches its climax, I think we'll get a glimpse of what the next greater threat is, and I don't think it's chaos. As I've mentioned in other videos, Abaddon isn't going to achieve everything he's looking to, because otherwise he'll crush Imperium Nihilus and set the stage for a true end-time situation in Warhammer 40k. That doesn't really work, because then every faction ends up becoming an extra in a rather binary conflict, and Games Workshop doesn't want that. Plus, just like with Chaos in 8th edition and Necrons in 9th edition, new editions of Warhammer 40k often become the backdrop for one faction to get a bit of a refresh, and to be blunt, that isn't going to be Chaos given all the love they've got over the recent years. So who is going to be the bigger threat of this new edition? Well, I think it's going to be the Tyranids, and for 3 specific reasons. Firstly, outside the devastation of Baal, we haven't really heard all that much from the Tyranid Hive fleets. We know they're active and are pretty much engulfing everything they come into contact with, but there hasn't been any standout story developments for them, and there hasn't been for a while. The Codex itself doesn't have much in the way of detail. It touches on the activities of the various Hive fleets, but then leans heavily into the history of the Tyrannic Wars without giving a real sense of where the Tyranids pose the most systemic threat to the galaxy. In contrast, we found out from the Shadow Throne box that there was an active Genestealer cult on Terra, a striking revelation that hasn't really developed much further. Given the true galactic scale that the Tyranid threat poses, I personally sense that there is a literal and figurative Tyranid wave building, which is set to break soon, and likely at the culmination of the Arks of Omen campaign. That will bring a new dimension to the galactic stalemate, and one that is incredibly adaptive, flexible, and somewhat fresh given the focus on chaos for much of the recent editions. The other reason I think Tyranids will claim the spotlight is simply because they yearn for a range refresh. We've seen from the recent Astra Militarum releases that Games Workshop can really breathe new life into a faction when they update some of the core model sets in those armies. Ironically though, that also has an effect on those factions that still rely on those older models, visually aging them even more and building anticipation for an update themselves. And who is going to buy those older models when they sense that something new must be on the way? Tyranids have had some great new models over the years, sure, but there's a few dusty ones in there too. The Hormagaunt and Termagant sprues date back to the year 2000, and the Genestealer sprues were made in 2004, as were the Carnifex sprues. And out of all of the Tyranid HQ options, not a single one was produced after 2013. You get the point. The Tyranid range is probably, at least to my reckoning, the oldest model range in Warhammer 40k right now, which puts a lot of pressure on GW when it comes to updating those models. That's not just because we want to see them as players, but it's also because that's how you sell products. The new Astra Militarum models appeal not only to existing Guard players, but new ones like me who want to try these refresh ranges, and the Tyranids are currently in the queue with plenty of players like myself waiting to buy what is undoubtedly coming down the line, and GW knows that. And what more perfect a way to launch that new range than with the 10th edition starter set? And with that in mind, I want to mention the third reason that Tyranids are likely to be the next big menace in 40k. If you look at the various other media, games and crossovers that Games Workshop has done, you'll notice that Tyranids are actually quite a common sight. They were one of the 4 40k Magic the Gathering sets, for example, and they are the big threat in the new Space Marine 2 game. In short, they often make up the public face of Warhammer 40k. One reason for that is that GW can easily trademark and promote them without people getting confused about IPs, for example. However, they're also quite a cool faction to sell to people. They are an iconic alien foe. So if GW is using Tyranids to bring people into the 40k universe and, given their business, to specifically get them into the hobby, they're going to want the best looking models waiting for those new customers. And that means refreshing those sprues dated 2013, 2004 and 2000 with models that really show the best of the Games Workshop design studio. But anyways, let's move on to the rules and what we may expect there. Over the course of 9th edition, we've seen the number of codex specific factions in 40k grow to their largest ever, most recently thanks to the Leagues of Votann and World Eaters. However, it's clear that while that's great for the business of producing and selling models, it hasn't always been smooth sailing for the game itself. The regular meta balances show, at the very least, that Warhammer 40k is a difficult system to balance, and as we saw with the Leagues of Votann, even getting factions to work properly at release can be a difficult task. In the end, there are a lot of rules to balance, and I think we'll see a lot of that get stripped back in 10th edition, specifically with stratagems and a lot of the rule sets that add more layers to the game than we probably need. Think about it, when you start a new army, you've got to think about detachment abilities, stratagems, warlord traits, relics, psychic powers and hero abilities, and then the various datasheets, war gear and points to consider. It's a lot to read through and keep track of, particularly for new players, and while I'm not suggesting that GW will scrap all of that, because I do feel that it adds depth to each of the factions, I do think they'll simplify that framework to make it easier for people to understand their factions and build great thematic armies. In my mind, that's leaner codexes, because it's easier to keep track of and balance when you have far fewer intricate rules to read through and add to FAQs. Alternatively, some of those more intricate relics, stratagems and rules could be split up into different game modes, simplifying which ones you need to remember and use based on the sorts of games you like to play. However, it could also be a new framework for building an army, perhaps where you choose a doctrine and that shapes the rules, relics, traits and stratagems you choose from. As you can probably guess, I'm no rules designer, but at the very least, I think GW are struggling with the breadth and depth of their own rules, and 10th edition is likely to see something that will make that easier for them, and for us as players, to keep track of. And another reason for that shift to a more simplified and leaner rule set is that Games Workshop is likely to continue introducing more smaller format games, like what we've seen with the new boarding actions. What boarding actions has done is create a more concrete space for new players to come into the game and for existing players to try new forces and factions without making big commitments in terms of time and money. Simply put, Games Workshop wants to keep doing that because the easier it is for you to pick up an army from scratch, paint them and get playing, the more likely you are to experiment with ranges that you might not normally do so, and that means better sales for the business. Contrast paints dealt with the painting side of things really well, and the concept of battle ready painting shows how GW wants to make getting into the game and new armies as frictionless as possible. However, as I said before, the rules and game modes are a different thing altogether, and in addition to those simplified rule sets that I mentioned earlier, I sense boarding actions will be just the start of a range of smaller game modes that get people playing snappier games of 40k. To some extent, those might be thematic, or they might push the rules in a different direction to try out game styles that aren't really supported in the main 40k rule set. For example, a take the flag sort of mode, where both forces try to hold a central objective for 2 turns and then the game ends. It creates fast-paced gaming without the need for complex armies. Your suggestions are as good as mine, but deep down I think we all know that getting around a table to play Warhammer can sometimes be a challenge all of its own, and the more friction there is to getting there, the less Games Workshop can thrive, so expect to see more of what we're seeing in the late stages of 9th edition. Another consideration, and it's not an easy one, is that the difficult economy we're in is bound to lead to Warhammer price rises at some point. Every business is doing it and GW can't avoid it, especially since it's based in the UK where some of the worst inflation is being felt. That's why we're seeing bespoke boarding action box sets coming out to sit alongside the combat patrol ones. So as bigger armies become more of an expensive investment, players will pull back, and GW will need more than just boarding actions and kill team to entice them into smaller 40k forces. They'll need a whole collection of smaller format games that will keep players excited and which may, in all honesty, make 1000-point armies a much more common sight than any other. But let's change the topic somewhat and discuss wider model releases, because while I expect Tyranids to get plenty of love in 10th edition, many other factions will get new models too, and I'm not just talking about Space Marines. However, one thing I expect we'll see in 10th Ed 40k is actually something that we already see a lot of in Age of Sigmar, and that's more centerpiece models. Age of Sigmar gets quite a bit of love and sometimes some criticism for how many large monstrous sized models it has in it. Practically every faction has them, and they're often the most legendary units in the game. So far though, 40k has leaned back from that sort of scale. The Primarchs and monsters like the Avatar are about as big as 40k models get if you exclude Forge World and the numerous heavy vehicles that many factions get access to. However, in recent years, we've seen the release of models like the Silent King and the Triumph of St. Catherine, which are just as much dioramas as anything else, almost presenting scenes rather than poses. And I expect we'll see more of those sorts of models across 10th edition. Just to be clear, I'm not saying that we'll see a swathe of new monsters and Titanic models, but rather that we'll see more heroes and legendary units come out that serve as thematic centerpieces for our armies, and which really show off what the Warhammer studio is capable of. In some ways, we're already seeing that in the Horus Heresy. Many of the Primarchs came with dioramic bases, often capturing thematic moments of the Heresy. However, now they're being updated again, and we've seen from the new Horus Ascended model that they're intended to be visual showstoppers as much as they are gaming ones. Personally, I think about what a new Asdrubale Vect will look like, no doubt being worked on somewhere in the depths of the Warhammer studio, and something that is surely going to be much more than a simple Ravager variant. Either way, I think that same approach, which we already see in AOS, will become more present in 40k as existing and new heroes are refreshed, and we may just see the next example of that very soon. Of course, the question that sits at the back of all of our minds is what new factions will we see in 10th edition? 9th edition saw the leagues of Votann, World Eaters and sub-factions like the Orc Beast Snaggers, all in all a pretty good addition for those wanting to try something completely new. And yet, I don't think we'll see quite the same level of releases in 10th ed, with one specific exception. Personally, I think we'll see the Emperor's Children Codex before the end of 10th, likely towards the end of 2025 or the beginning of 2026. That might seem like an age away, but remember that we first heard glimpses of the new World Eaters back when Shadowspear was being released, and that was in March 2019. Releasing the Emperor's Children will complete the Chaos Primarch Pantheon for now, and as I said in my video on which Emperor's Children models we might expect, it may set the stage for a return to Chaos after the Tyranids have had their fun with us. That said, I think we will see more sub-faction releases, but not in a way that we might initially expect. There's a lot of talk about Eldari Exercites, for example, and given the amount of focus codex releases and model ranges take to produce, I think we'll see models like those appear in something like Kill Team. The Adeptus Arbites and Krieg Guardsman Kill Team sets have shown that that game setting is a great one to bring out new models in, and it allows Games Workshop to take a few more risks on the factions it brings to life. We may, for example, see more Guard regiments being refreshed, maybe a new Katachan set for example, as well as new races altogether. And while that again shows why GW will want to support smaller game modes in the future, helping players to try out these ranges without making big commitments, the other benefit is that the design teams can focus more on updating existing ranges. That's not just the Tyranids, but also the Eldari Aspect Warriors, the Drukhari range in general, and sets ranging from Tau Crisis battlesuits to Orc Meganobs. There's a lot in 40k that could do with updating, and until they are, there's an impact on people wanting to buy them, as I mentioned before. And with every new codex that comes out in 10th comes another cog that has to be carefully tuned to the dozens of others that already exist, with the added risk that, like the Votann, you get it wrong and, even worse, put people off playing altogether. So I feel 10th edition will be more of a consolidation edition, focusing on simpler rules and updating the model ranges that already exist without introducing many brand new factions. Plus, and here's a bit of an odd angle to take, there's a lot of models in Age of Sigmar that need updating. Just look at the Beasts of Chaos range, and we'll also be seeing the likely release of the Old World. That puts a lot of pressure on the design teams and manufacturing, so I think 40k can take a bit of a breather when it comes to massive new releases. But those are just my expectations for 10th edition Warhammer 40k. What do you expect to see, or what are you hoping for? And what do you think the lessons from 9th edition were? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. And as always, I want to say a big thank you for joining me today. If you enjoyed the video, please click the like button and subscribe to the channel if you want to join me for more Warhammer content. And I do hope you'll join me for my next video. Until then though, do take care.